Is China targeting Trump's phone? Is Musk talking to Putin? And why Harris is deep in the heart of Texas. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
Can you imagine her standing with President Xi of China? I don't think so.
Donald Trump taking a swipe at Vice President Kamala Harris earlier today, but there are much bigger questions tonight about what happens when he swipes to answer a phone call. The New York Times reporting tonight that Chinese hackers are said to have targeted phones used by Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. The FBI releasing a statement today saying China is targeting commercial telecommunications infrastructure. No mention of Trump or Vance in their statement, though. Trump's former chief of staff joins us here on the Hill later in the show with his perspective. But first tonight, it is Friday Night Lights in Texas.
It's good to be in Texas, and we are here because obviously it is a very important state.
We are getting the political homestretch version this evening. Vice President Harris is in Houston tonight alongside Beyonce. Trump in Austin as he sits down with Joe Rogan for a podcast that drops tomorrow. We begin tonight with our Allie Bradley, who was in Austin this evening, traveling alongside the former president. Allie?
Yeah, hey, Blake, before he took off to go sit down with the #1 podcaster in the nation, Joe Rogan, he was here at an airport hangar in Austin, kind of making these remarks about migrant crime and illegal immigration to a group of supporters and donors, including people like Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Barrasso. They were here stumping for Senator Cruz, trying to maintain his Senate seat. Now, when it comes to the focus for the former president, it was all about migrant crime, all about illegal immigration and the impacts in the nation. Now, he pointed directly to Jocelyn Nungary, a 12-year-old who was killed in Houston, the state where he says, or the city rather, where Kamala Harris is tonight. And Alexis Nungary was there, the mother of that 12-year-old. The former president hammering that note very hard. Take a listen.
Today, Kamala is here in Texas to rub shoulders with woke celebrities. Isn't that exciting? But she's not going to meet with any of the victims of migrant crime while she's here. We have many of them right here, the families. We have many of them, and they're incredible people.
Okay, so now that he has wrapped things up here, taped that podcast with Joe Rogan, sorry, you're going to have to wait a little bit. Tomorrow, that one comes out. But Blake, he has a lot of eyeballs. Joe Rogan's shows get about 14.5 million views on average. So that is something that the former president wants to capitalize on, right? Joe Rogan has a lot of young male voters, a lot of voters. But Joe Rogan has also been hypercritical of the former president. So it'll be interesting to see their interaction. And if he asks him about things like the vetting process, what you're looking at on your screen right now, where thousands of migrants are pouring across the country, and we know we just don't have access to those criminal databases, Blake, that hasn't changed, despite those illegal crossings being down. Blake.
Our Allie Bradley live tonight in Texas. Allie, thank you. So is Trump in that state, possibly trying to do something that hasn't been done since one of Texas's most famous politicians accomplished a big feat? I'll explain for you in about 15 minutes why Trump might have his eyes set on something else beyond winning the swing states. Now, with both Vice President Harris and Donald Trump campaigning in the Lone Star State tonight, it is squarely in the center of the political universe. Also, one of the most closely watched Senate races in the country is happening right now in Texas. The incumbent, Ted Cruz, the Democratic challenger, the Congressman Colin Allred right now in a race there that is being challenged by Allred. Let's bring in a man who knows a thing or two about the politics of Texas inside and out. He is the former governor, energy secretary as well, Rick Perry. Governor Perry, thanks for being with us here on the Hill tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got it. So Vice President Harris in Houston, President Trump in Austin tonight. Do you look? I'm sure you want the top two in your state as much as possible, but do you think it's a good use of their time right now, being in Texas? It's not one of the 7 key swing states. Do you think they should be there? You've run for president before, or do you think they should be in the 7 that at the end of the day are gonna make this race tilt one way or another?
Yeah, well, President Trump being in the state of Texas is a good thing. And it's a good thing because he's talking about immigration. He's talking about the crimes that have been committed by these illegals that have come in. He brought up a family, met with a family today from Bastrop, Texas, the Davis family. Their son last week was killed by an illegal that had been deported 2 times, had 2 DUIs. I think blew over a .3. I mean, this guy was absolutely drunk out of his mind, ran into and killed an innocent Texan, Grayson Davis, a fine, sweet 29-year-old young man who had his life in front of him. And so President Trump being here with those families and showcasing that Colin Allred and Kamala Harris are for opening that border up and letting these individuals in unvetted. That's why Donald Trump being in the state of Texas is a powerful message today. And, you know, we're just touching on the illegal immigration issue. When you start talking about energy policy and the things that Donald Trump did for this country from the standpoint of making us energy independent, then you understand. I think this is a good place for Donald Trump. Now, Kamala Harris, probably wasting her time in the great state of Texas.
Let me ask you about immigration. You were governor there. You know that you took action after action to try to get control of the southern border. Here's what you said a decade ago, Governor. You said, "I will not stand by idly while our citizens are under assault and little children from Central America are detained in squalor. We are too good of a country for that." I have to imagine you would want every resource imaginable for the state of Texas. Donald Trump, as you know, though, was a big reason why this bipartisan Senate bill did not come to fruition. Here was what Trump said earlier this year. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Despite the worst border crisis in U.S. history, crooked Joe Biden just tried to ram through a massive open borders bill that would allow nearly 2 million illegals per year. I think we killed it. I think it's dead.
Was he wrong to kill that bill?
And I totally agree with him, because that piece of legislation, number one, it was way too late in the process to be pushing that forward. What President Trump did,
but you'd want the help, though, I would think, right?
He stopped that. He stopped the border crossings as well as any president in history. When you look at the bookends of Obama and Biden on each end of Donald Trump, that's the reason Donald Trump's going to win, because people know that he is going to make real efforts and really stop this illegal crossing. He's going to round up these individuals. We're going to make sure that they get deported, and if they don't, we catch them and we put them in incarcerate them. And the other side of it is he clearly sends the message to Mexico that we're going to work with you, but we're going to stop this nonsense that we're seeing on the border now and stop these illegals coming into this country who we don't have any idea who they are. We see the criminality that comes out of it, this Agua or Tren de Agua group that's in here from Venezuela. Right. I mean, it is out of control, and Donald Trump will put it back in control.
So you ran against Trump, obviously, once for president. You had talked about maybe considering doing it again. You joked earlier this year, Governor, that the term rhino, Republican in name only, is sexy. At an event that you had earlier this year. Donald Trump has gone after, quote unquote, rhinos. And I was looking back, for example, at your policies. When you ran for president, you campaigned on lowering the corporate tax rate to 20%. Donald Trump basically did that. No tax on Social Security. You were talking about that a decade ago, but you've also mentioned things like balancing the budget. That's a joke in the current landscape right now. He said he would kill. You talked about ending Obamacare, reforming entitlements. Trump hasn't done any of that. Has he let you down in some ways, Governor?
Not at all. I can't wait for Donald Trump to be back at the White House, because we know his policies. And more importantly, we know the individuals that he will bring with him to put into all of these places of government. When he's in Atlanta the last few days, and he's got Robert Kennedy Jr. on the stage with him, I can't wait to the day that RFK Jr. is the head of the FDA. You talk about putting all of those crazies at the FDA and Big Pharma on notice that we're coming after you, and we're coming after you hard. That's the type of real discombobulation, the real breaking up of the government cabal that I think Americans are absolutely hungry for.
Let me leave you with this, Governor. As I mentioned, former governor, you know your state inside out better than I ever will. But I was looking at the numbers today. Texas has gone red at the presidential level the last 11 times. You haven't had a Democratic senator there since 1988. But I'm looking at Ted Cruz, the DDHQ polling. The polling averages show he's under 50 right now. Why is he such a weak candidate?
Ted will be the next senator, and that's all that matters. I've won some elections with very close margins before. As a matter of fact, I won a governorship with 39.9% of the race because we had multiple candidates in the general election. The point was I may have been as they referred to me, the 39% governor, but I may have been the 39% winner, let me put it that way, but I was 100% governor. And that's what you're going to have with Ted Cruz on November the 6th. He will be the senator and a third-term senator for the great state of Texas.
Senator Rick Perry, got to leave it there, sir. Thanks for being with us on a Friday evening here on the Hill.
Have a good weekend.
You as well. All right. So as you can see, both campaigns out on the campaign trail, all putting out all the stops in the final push for the White House. But will it be enough? Axios reporting today that some Democrats fear they are, quote, blowing it. And with Harris spending one of the final days in the campaign in Texas, are they right to be worried? Joining me now, Lauren Wright, NewsNation political contributor, political scientist at Princeton University, Brad Howard, Democratic strategist. Hello to you both. Happy Friday. Yeah. I find it fascinating that Trump is on Rogan tonight.
Yes.
And I was looking at some of the stats. Joe Rogan, 14.5 million followers on Spotify. That blows everyone else out of the water. It's the number one podcast.
And the same amount on YouTube. It's
unbelievable. And basically Instagram as well. 81% men, 56% between 18 to 34. He's trying to go after this specific demographic. Why?
Yes, but it's also a huge group of people that have pretty iffy politics. Maybe they don't vote in every single election. Maybe they're swing voters.
This is the low propensity voter strategy.
Yes, and the strategy is with any celebrity or any big audience, that's sort of a mixed audience, you just want them incidentally to be exposed to the candidate so they have a chance to share their message. So I don't know why Harris isn't doing it too. I think these guys are sort of up for grabs, but it's absolutely a smart strategy.
Is she wasting her time in Texas?
No.
Why?
A couple of reasons. The first is that, there's a critical Senate race there. But what it is, and I pointed this out on the show last week and was laughed at, it is the hometown to Beyonce. And Beyonce is now confirmed, confirmed.
I said to you, come on, really? I heard that once before already. But
Beyonce's
does that move the needle, though?
So, to your point, Trump is going after the low propensity voters who he thinks he can get them out to vote. If he can get them out to vote, he's convinced they're going to vote for him. She is going after high propensity voters, which are college educated, live in wealthy suburbs, Republicans that don't like his politics or his rhetoric, and so she's trying to persuade them, but she has to make sure her base turns out. And her base is young people and voters of color, and Beyonce is a cultural icon. She's much more than a musician. She has paved her way, and there is a relationship between her and her fans that is going to translate and expose Kamala's campaign to voters that probably weren't paying attention beforehand.
Gender gap. She's got an issue with men and with younger men. Should she have done Rogan?
I think Rogan, there's a lot of political risk. At this point in the campaign, you should be running a very low-risk strategy. If you're down by 10 points, these Hail Marys make sense. Right now, stay tuned to your message, make a closing argument, and turn out the vote.
By the way, in full disclosure, we were hoping to take you out to the Harris campaign event in Texas. A little bit of technical difficulties on our end, which is why we couldn't take you there tonight. Kamala Harris in Houston this evening alongside, as Brad mentioned, Beyonce. Still to come here on the Hill is China trying to hack Trump and J.D. Vance's phone, the new reporting out tonight, and what we are learning. Plus, should the government investigate Elon Musk over his phone calls with Putin? What the head of NASA is now saying, and we are only 11 days away from Election Day, where Trump and Harris are locked in a dead heat. We break down the new numbers, and I'll explain on the other side of the break. You know how we always talk about the 7 key swing states? What about the popular vote? And should we start paying attention when the Hill returns? I'm Blake Berman. Welcome to Washington. Back and forth. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. I'm Blake Berman. A Republican presidential candidate hasn't won the popular vote since George W. Bush beat John Kerry back in 2004 by 3 million votes. The last one before George W. was his father, George H.W. Bush, who crushed Michael Dukakis by 7 million votes. But tonight, there is a real question. 20 years since the last time it happened. Could the Republican candidate for president do just that? win the popular vote. Look at these three new national polls, all out within the last 24 hours or so. They all show Donald Trump either tied with Vice President Harris nationwide or leading her by 1 or 2 points, however you look at the split. There's a New York Times Siena College poll. Trump and Harris are tied, though in the expanded, he's up. A CNN poll, they're tied, or 1 point or so. The Wall Street Journal poll, Trump has a 3-point lead at 1 point over Harris. The point here is they're either tied or he's got a slight lead. Now, you've heard us say time and time again, it is these swing states that matter, and they do. Bottom line, all you need is 270 Electoral College votes to win. You're headed to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But we had our friends at Decision Desk HQ extrapolate what a popular win for Trump, if it happens, could mean. Here's some of the numbers. If Trump wins the popular vote by 1 or more votes, he has an 83% chance of winning the presidency. If he wins by 2%, it's basically game over from there. A 94% chance of winning the presidency, and you see where it's at if he wins by 4%. Now, Harris's chances of winning the presidency, different, as you might imagine. If the popular vote is tied, she has a 17% chance of winning. Now, if she were to lose the popular vote by 2%, there's a 6% chance of winning the presidency. Again, pretty much close to game over. Now, the House and the Senate are also up for grabs, as you know, and if Trump wins the popular vote, there is a 99% chance that Republicans flip the Senate, and 86% chance that Republicans keep the House. Now get this, Harris needs to win the popular vote by 8% for Democrats, this is according to DDHQ, for Democrats to have a 50-50 chance of winning the Senate. As it relates to the House, she needs to win by about 1% for Democrats to have a coin flip shot of winning the House. Joining me now is Michaela Carr, former Chief of Staff to Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Linda Tran, former Senior Advisor to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Hello to you both. Happy Friday night. We're talking about the popular vote because all of a sudden we've been talking about momentum possibly for Trump in the polls, and you're starting to see that, Linda, at least nationwide. And if you get to the point, no matter who it is, if you win the popular vote, you win the Electoral College, you win both houses, both chambers, that's a mandate, is it not, whether you want it or not? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if that's what it is, that's a mandate.
That would be a big win for Donald Trump. I do have to say, I think it's a really tall order, right? Even the percentage numbers that we're talking about there, Joe Biden beat him by 7 million votes. That 8% figure?
Like 5% or so, right? So 5 and change.
That 8% number, assuming that a similar number turnout, which was close to 82 million voters, Kamala Harris would have to win by 6.5 million. These are astronomically large gaps, actually. If you put it into context of the last few years, I mean, remember the last time that Donald Trump won, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by nearly 2.9 million votes and swing in the opposite direction. You go back a lot further than that, and Al Gore won the popular vote by 530,000 votes back in the year 2000, and that's the year that Republicans
Don't
won.
take us back to that year in the hanging chads.
Exactly. But my point is that these swings are pretty significant to ask for.
You can talk swing state polls, Michaela, popular vote, all you want. At the end of the day, you cannot control 150 million Americans, give or take, and getting them out to the polls. And we're hearing concerns. There have been stories for the last month about the Republicans' ground game. Is it there? Is it what it needs to be for this low propensity voter strategy? Is it there?
It's definitely better than it was.
Okay.
I think,
Is it there, though? Better than it was and needing to beat a win?
We'll find out together. I mean, the reality is these swing states tend to go together. They don't tend to split.
Right.
And so we will find out together. I think we have seen a huge increase in accepting the enthusiasm to go and vote, to quote unquote swamp the vote and get people in early voting and get them out there. I think what's really interesting about these numbers right now is that there's been a lot of criticism over the Electoral College for the last couple decades. If that were to shift, I think what I've been saying for years and years is just changing the rules doesn't change the outcome. People would campaign differently. You would see Republicans go into California and spend more time there. So I find it really interesting.
Trump's in Texas. He's going to Madison Square Garden, right? He was out in California. And I just start to connect those dots and wonder if he thinks that this is real. And the polling shows maybe it happens. I don't know.
Maybe, but you also have Kamala Harris in Texas and choosing that location, right? Because Colin Allred is within shooting distance of Ted Cruz, and she's using it because she wants the platform to talk about abortion rights, reproductive rights, because it's a hallmark area, right, for that particular issue. So there are reasons that they go. I think Donald Trump also had to be in New York because he was on trial.
Right. Well, he's also going to Madison Square Garden this weekend.
He is, and there's part of it is trying to get votes, and part of it is trying to get enthusiasm from your base so that people will show up. That low propensity voter sees you doing something fun, whether it's Kamala Harris with Beyonce or Trump at Madison Square Gardens, builds the enthusiasm.
Michaela, Linda, thank you. See you later in the show. Still much more ahead here on the Hill. On the left right now, live look, Charlotte, North Carolina. Barack Obama will campaign for Vice President Harris this evening. And on the right, live look, Traverse City, Michigan, where Donald Trump is expected to speak this evening as well. If they happen during our hour, you will see them live. Plus, it's the space battle here on Earth. NASA questioning SpaceX's founder, Elon Musk. Is he talking to Vladimir Putin? And warnings that China tried to break into the phones of Donald Trump potentially. What the FBI is saying. The Hill returns. All right, here we go. Welcome back to The Hill. Live look right now as the race for the White House enters the home stretch with Election Day 1 week from Tuesday. Let us take you around the television here. Top left, J.D. Vance, North Carolina. Bottom left, Donald Trump, Michigan. Top right, Tim Walz, Pennsylvania. Bottom right, former President Obama in North Carolina, stumping for VP Harris. Tonight, we are learning of a potential new threat against former President Trump and his campaign. The New York Times is reporting that Chinese hackers targeted phones used by Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. Joining me now with the very latest, Joe Khalil, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Hello, sir. What do we know tonight?
So it's not just, per the reporting, Trump and Vance. It's also members of the Harris campaign and high-level Dems on Capitol Hill. Why this is important, Blake, is because let's say China's successful in that hack. They know who these candidates are talking to, for how long they're talking to them, if they have texts and emails in that phone, what they're talking about. All of that information really dangerous in the hands of our strongest adversary. Verizon and the FBI both have acknowledged, yes, this happened. They're looking into why. Just this week, I talked to Senator Mark Warner, chairman of the Intel Committee. What he told me is, what's interesting, Iran has a preferred candidate. We know what it is. It's Kamala Harris. Russia has a preferred candidate. It's Donald Trump. Both have been using misinformation to try to prop their campaigns up and tear down the other guy. And so chaos generally. But China, he said, interestingly, hasn't really picked a preference when it comes to their hacking. What they have done, though, generally is try to sow discord. And he said he's more worried about China than the others because of their capability, especially with hacking. And he said the concern there is they're hitting down ballot races, but they have hands in everything. And again, their capability significantly worse than the others. He's more worried about the period after the election also than now. So the fact that it's happening now is concerning, but they really have an eye on what happens after the election. There's a lot of room for chaos and to try to sow that division in the U.S.
Interesting. Joe Khalil with us tonight. Joe, thank you very much. All right, come on in. Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Mick, thanks for being with us. I know you can't talk about Donald Trump's phone, nor would I ever ask you. I wonder what you made of it as a obviously former member of Congress, but also as a former chief of staff when you saw this.
It doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, when you and I talked about this an hour or two ago, I thought it was just Trump and Vance. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, it's just going to be a matter of time before we find out this is happening to Harris, to Chuck Schumer, to everybody else in the Hill. And there you are, Joe Khalil reporting it's already coming out. This is just everybody. Look, we've always sort of known in politics, if you're on the Hill, if you're in the White House, you got to be careful, yes. But if it's on your phone, there's a really good chance that some bad guys are looking at it. You just have to go about your life like that. There's certain things you can't avoid, but generally speaking, you should assume that if you don't want anybody to see it, don't put it on your phone.
All right. Mick, stand by here for a second. Want to get your thoughts on something else. Earlier today, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, asked about her potential cabinet, should she win, and whether or not she would tap one of America's most powerful men.
Jamie Dimon wants to be a part of your cabinet. Have you talked to him about that? And do you think Wall Street should be a part of your cabinet?
We have 11 days to go. I do not have a cabinet yet. And so the decisions I'm making are all about what I will be doing and what we will be doing to remind the American people of the power of their vote.
All right, so she took a pass there with the question about Jamie Dimon, but it goes to show you the influence of the world's biggest banker. And tonight there are more questions about the world's richest man. According to the Wall Street Journal, Elon Musk has been in regular contact with the Russian President Vladimir Putin since 2022, according to the Journal. News, if true, opens the door to a number of questions, including what have they been talking about and his security clearance. For example, the NASA administrator, the head of NASA, Bill Nelson, one person raising that question now, saying that if true, quotes, I think it should be investigated. He goes on to say that would be concerning, particularly for NASA, for the Department of Defense, for some of the intelligence agencies. All right, Mick. So again, this is a report from the Wall Street Journal. No one in Washington's really talking about this. But what about the idea that one person can be so important that maybe, just maybe, they get to play by a potential different set of rules?
Yeah, with the preface that there's still a lot of questions about this story. Yes, it's the Wall Street Journal, so I give it a lot more credibility than I would say the Washington Post on an issue because of Elon Musk's political activity. But let's assume for sake of this discussion, the story is accurate or near accurate. Your question is, do important people get treated differently? Generally speaking in life, yes, they do. I mean, we'd be naive to say it doesn't happen if the rich and the powerful don't get treated differently, generally speaking. Different story on national security. No, there's not a separate set of rules for Elon Musk. I don't care how important Starlink is. I don't care how important the rocket programs are. There's just no way you can rely on simple trust when it comes to national security. Keep in mind, Musk has a very high level of security clearance. I don't know what it is, but he said it was top secret. That's fairly high up there. If he's got that type of material or it's access to that, you can't have him talking to our chief adversary. So if it's true, this could be a very, very serious thing, and you might start to see some change in behavior by Mr. Musk.
Mick, this was his response on his platform, X. Someone said, well, this swamps Trump as Hitler, didn't work. Might as well give Elon as a Russian agent a whirl. And he responded to that with some emojis there, as you can see. This does come as he's hit the campaign trail, but it also for Donald Trump. But it also comes as there are real questions about, does one person have too much power?
Yeah, and listen, the politics of this, you'd be naive to ignore it. We're at 10 or 11 days from an election. Might this be a story that somebody in the Democrat administration is pushing to the Wall Street Journal? Yes, there's a real chance for that. Bill Nelson, a nice guy, I admire him, a former Democrat senator, a member of the Democrat cabinet. NASA is not an independent position. It's appointed by the president, so he's a political appointee. Could be a lot of politics here. But to the general issue, would this be a problem? If it is true, the answer is yes. You cannot have folks with this type of clearance having these types of conversations. There's a reason we have official channels. We have a president. We have a Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. You don't let private citizens do this kind of stuff, generally speaking.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Have a great weekend, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Blake. You too.
You got it. All right. All across the country right now, people are making their choice, don't you know? We're not talking about the election in this case. Rather, teenagers who are applying to college for early decision, basically the route that sort of binds you to go to one college if you get in. Now, look at this story here from The Hill. As college early decision deadlines approach, students across the country are factoring in politics when deciding where to apply. A new report showing over a quarter of college applicants are changing their minds on applying to certain universities, maybe go there or don't go there, based on state politics. For example, conservative students tend to avoid California and New York, while liberal students were more likely to rule Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, and Tennessee out of their considerations, although Texas was avoided by the most number of students surveyed, at least by state. It also comes at a time when enrollment for first-year undergraduate students is down by nearly 5% since last year. With me now, the professor, Princeton University, NewsNation contributor Lauren Wright. What's going on here?
Well, it's going on both sides of the ideological spectrum. I think for young women in particular, abortion laws are a consideration, like they weren't when I was going to college in North Carolina, for instance. Now they have a 12-week abortion ban there. And for conservative students who I talk to all day long, because I'm writing a book about college students right now, they are really hesitant to go to these schools, especially Jewish students, where they saw the encampments, they saw the slurs, and they're really scared, even when it comes to a top school that's a feeder for all these government leadership.
What do you mean by these schools?
Well, I mean the Ivy Plus schools. You know, Princeton, there are tons of reasons why you'd go to Princeton. It's an unbelievable school, but we don't have institutional neutrality, for instance. That puts us behind our peers who have, in reaction to all the Israel-Palestine protests, said, we want to make sure students come here thinking there's not an ideological orthodoxy on campus. We want students to be free to speak their mind, and they are in a lot of ways, but that's just a really easy signal you could give that they haven't.
On that report, real quick, that it's possible, we don't have the full data, but it's possible that there's a 5% decrease in college enrollment. Is that kids or families saying, you know what, I saw that last year, I didn't like it, I'll go do something else?
It could be, and college is expensive, and a lot of jobs are now making a point of saying they're open to non-college graduates that weren't before. That includes a lot of state government positions. We have that in New Jersey going for us. So there's a lot of different developments, and people are weighing the costs and the benefits.
Your book's about?
Well, it's called Tested, Why Conservatives Get More Out of Liberal Education. And it's not out yet. I will tell you when, I promise.
Lauren, stay right there. We'll be back here in a few. Only 11 days left in the campaign. Attacks on both sides are heating up. Why the top Republican leaders on Capitol Hill today are saying enough. It also comes after Hillary Clinton accuses Trump of something well beyond politics. Full panel, other side of the break.
A live NewsNation special. It's time to have your final say on this year's race for the White House.
Join Cuomo, O'Reilly, Smith, plus Cuban, Palin, and Kennedy. Wednesday, only on NewsNation.
Stop it now. That was essentially the statement today from Washington's top two Republicans to Vice President Kamala Harris. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, and the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, releasing a letter today telling the VP to stop labeling Donald Trump a fascist. They say it could lead to violence, writing in part, quote, her most recent and most reckless invocations of the darkest evil of the 20th century seem to dare it to boil over. The vice president's words more closely resemble those of President Trump's second would-be assassin than her own earlier appeal to civility, end quote. Now, if you've paid attention to the presidential race, you have seen language from both sides that have dabbled in the extreme.
We have an enemy from within. They hate to talk about it. But could you imagine? Could you imagine?
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And just last night, a former First Lady, former Secretary of State, former presidential nominee suggested that Trump's weekend event at Madison Square Garden will be like reenacting a neo-Nazi rally.
Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany.
But perhaps the bright spot came in last night's NewsNation town hall. Senator J.D. Vance asked about political rhetoric and gave this advice, no matter your political leaning or who you may or may not be voting for.
My most important advice, whether you vote for me, whether you vote for Donald Trump, whether you vote for Kamala Harris, don't cast aside family members and lifelong friendships. Politics is not worth it. And I think if we follow that principle, we'll heal the divide in this country.
All right, full panel with me now. Michaela Carr, former chief of staff to Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Linda Tran, former senior advisor to Pete Buttigieg. Brad Howard, Democratic strategist. And Lauren Wright, NewsNation political contributor. Hello to you all. Full panel here. Great to talk to you all in person, all of us together. does Kamala Harris need to cut it out with the fascists and the Democrats,
Look,
Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell?
I'll say, first of all, that letter was rich coming from leaders of the Republican Party when Donald Trump has not only called her a fascist, he's called her all the ish. He's called her a communist, a socialist, and a Marxist in many previous statements. He's also talked about the enemy within. Let's keep in mind that is a political movement. It is a type of government that must be stopped. What she is saying is stop it at the ballot box. There's only one candidate in this race that is using violent rhetoric, that is encouraging violence at his rallies, that has demonstrated support for violence at his rallies, not to mention tried to interfere in the counting of an election and to rob voters of what the election result was. And so that is troubling and alarming. And she was responding to a 3-star, 4-star general who was Trump's chief of staff, who said he has a fascist. So she was responding to that. Let's be clear.
Can you name a Republican presidential candidate Democrats have not called a fascist?
This is my point.
They do it every single time. They've been loudly predicting fascism for 20-plus years.
It's on both sides.
The message is not working. The cynical thing would be, if I said, if I were speaking on behalf of the GOP, the most cynical thing I could say is I hope Kamala Harris keeps saying this because voters are not buying the anti-democracy message. Republicans think she's a threat to democracy. They haven't defined it. Democrats think he's a threat to democracy. As long as she's talking about this and not the economy, she will lose the
Here's
election.
What they're trying to do. They're trying to do this both sides of things. They're trying to make Trump's rhetoric appear as bad as Kamala's. It is not. Trump's rhetoric is much more violent.
Gymnastics move, blaming the target of political violence for political violence. This takes a lot of gymnastics.
He is dangerous.
And
she is asking the American people to ignore the record. And the votes show that the polls show people have a better perception of the Trump presidency on issues of economy, on issues of immigration, on issues of our perception on the global stage. They have a better perception of his presidency than they do of Biden's. And she's had a real opportunity over and over again. She's been asked, what are your substantive answers to policy questions? And she says he is a bad guy. Make me president. It's not enough.
But that's not what she's saying.
Hold on, is it kudos to J.D. Vance?
Is it kudos to J.D. Vance for
saying what he did last night?
It's also rich after saying Haitian immigrants are eating your cats and dogs. And by the way, even if that's not true, I'm still going to keep bringing it up. So I think what Brad is saying is that this sort of whataboutism and fake parody across the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party just doesn't quite ring true. The most important thing about what Kamala Harris has been saying when she says he is a fascist is she's literally saying, don't take my word for it. Take the words of the most senior members of the Trump administration who worked closely with him, who corroborate that he says things like Hitler does some good things.
And I want to correct the record real quick. What her closing argument is not that he is dangerous. And you're right.
It's a lot of it.
No.
I promise you,
but here's my point.
Whether it's right or wrong,
you're right. Voters look upon the Trump presidency as good. Her argument is that he is older now. He is becoming more unhinged.
What I will
and
say,
just to your point, dangerous. It's not that he is or was. It's that he's heading that way.
Words are not violence. People are responsible for their own actions. Words are not violence. We should not use any of this as an excuse to allow the federal government to have more power over censoring speech. So I'm certainly not going to take the position that her speech should be censored. The alternative to bad speech is more speech, and if she could have some better speech about her policies, the polls would not be neck and neck within the margin of error.
Let me leave it with this. What was that from Hillary Clinton last night?
Hillary Clinton has very strong opinions, very clear. But look, I do want to respond to what Michaela just said, which is words are not violence, but words can incite violence. There's a reason why Kamala Harris is making her closing argument at the Ellipse, the site where Donald Trump incited folks to rush the Capitol at a time when you can't imagine that people would ever have done that. And then people actually lost their lives as a result of it.
So here's I think, the bottom line. What J.D. Vance said last night, take his words.
It was nice to hear.
Yeah, take his words, right?
I don't give him credit, but it was nice to hear. With the way 11 days, my goodness, 11 days left.
And we will all go in the green room and be friends.
We all go in the green room and be friends. These are all, but you can at least hear what he had to say last night, whether you agree with him or not. It was certainly refreshing to hear. All right, coming up this weekend. Chris Stirewalt hosts The Hill Sunday here on NewsNation. Chris will be talking to the Democratic governor from New Mexico. He also will be talking to the Republican congresswoman from Michigan, Lisa McClain. Be sure to watch The Hill Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Stirewalt here on NewsNation. You don't want to miss it. By the way, as the vice president is set to speak in the Lone Star State this evening, We say hello to our friends in Hill County, Texas. The county seat of Hill County is Hillsboro, and is located about 70 miles southwest of Dallas. In the 2020 election, Hill County, Texas went overwhelmingly red for Donald Trump, receiving 78% of the vote. Hill County is represented by the Republican Congressman Jake Ellzey. A big hello from our Hill to yours. To those watching us on NewsNation or listening to us on Sirius XM, from our Hill to yours. Hello in Hill County. Coming up, live look, Houston, Texas. Kamala Harris, the big event for her later this evening. Beyonce expected alongside the VP later tonight. Tomorrow, by the way, she's going to be appearing alongside Michelle Obama. Why is she choosing to appear with Michelle Obama on the day she is where she is? I'll get into that with Leland Vittert, other side of the break, as we also take a live look at the Trump rally. Welcome to the final stretch. We're back in a few. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. A couple live looks right now. Traverse City, Michigan, where Donald Trump will take the stage in later this hour. Earlier today, or at least coming up this hour as well, Kamala Harris in Texas alongside Beyonce in Texas. Tomorrow, by the way, in Michigan, Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, a state we both know well. Kamala Harris alongside Michelle Obama. And Leland, when that got announced last week, that they were going to be in Michigan this upcoming Saturday, I said to our campaign producer who follows Kamala Harris, I said, can you double check that, please? Are they really going to Michigan on Saturday, October 26th? And they said, why? I said,
is that Ohio State?
That's Michigan State in prime time in the Big House Saturday. Please double check that they're doing that. It is, you know this, the most important day, bar none, in the whole state. And I'm thinking to myself, that big event is when they're doing it in Michigan. I wonder if that's a big oversight there.
You know, let's just put it this way. Whoever was doing advance, okay, is not a college football fan and not from Michigan.
That the only thing that matters tomorrow is if Michigan or Michigan State wins in that game tomorrow night. But I don't know. They're having the biggest event.
Since I'm here with a Wolverine, I'm not surprised you didn't say so that we can all watch Michigan beat Michigan State. But look, hey, Donald Trump showing up at Penn State game.
Yeah.
So he knows how to lean in to the college football crowd. Yeah. We're going to be covering that a little later. Traverse City's interesting, way up north.
Yeah.
Interesting that he's headed all the way up there.
Who you got coming up tonight?
Big man, Chris Cillizza's here. Also, George Will on some exclusive reporting we have to break here in a minute.